Good morning, macroeconomics. And first of all, I want to remember you. And maybe we come to this topic today, especially to money, what is money about, and monetary policy. And that we will have a talk about this in December. Then let's go on. We are still at the system of economic aims within economy, steady and appropriate growth, measured at the change of real GDP, price level stability, with respect to the development of consumer prices. And last time we have talked about unemployment. So today we will come to external balance, and then we come to some further aims. And unemployment in general, well, people who are not working but willing to work, and then we have different definitions. In almost every country you have a so-called official definition by the Labor Department, and people who fall under this definition, they then getting the transfers. But of course, in every country, these definitions will differ, and therefore, if you want to compare the labor market with respect to unemployment rates, then you have to have also a definition or a measure which is the same over the countries, and this is given by the International Labour Organization. It is quite the same as the official definitions, but of course differs a little bit, and so to speak, there is not that right definition what is unemployment, but always you have to ask yourself what is your question, what you want to answer, and then you have to choose the right measure for this. Yeah, and then we were talking about different types of unemployment, and we divided this in short term, medium term, and long term. And for short term, we had seasonal and frictional unemployment. Well, and the very difference between these two were just that seasonal unemployment more or less, yeah, depends on the framework of your economy where you cannot do very much about, because the weather in midst of Europe is changing like the weather is changing. Well, we are doing it in a very long run, changing the weather due to climate change, but still we have winter, we have summer times, we have spring and autumn, and during winter times that not that much buildings are built in our country, and therefore especially for the construction sector. Then you have during winter time unemployment. Also, you can think of the agricultural sector, of the tourism sector, that you have there a dependence on the seasons. And what is also important, well, over the year we have more or less stable events that we are going to holiday during summer times, and also when are ending classically our education times. Think of school. School mostly ends then in summer, and then the people dropping out of school, they to the labor market, then actually they will be maybe hired in autumn around October, and therefore you have also these hiring cycles, that you have a fall in unemployment in spring, and you have a fall in unemployment in autumn. And yeah, in difference to that, frictional unemployment, this is also short term, and this is due to the mismatch between the labor demander, the enterprises, and the labor supplier, you, that maybe there is your job, but you cannot find it. Or the other way around, the enterprise does not know that you exist. And of course, this is then due to incomplete information. And about this problem, of course, we can do something. And we will come also to this when we talk about the business cycle and the so-called potential output of an economy and the dependence on the different types of unemployment, because cyclical unemployment is, of course, then dependent on the performance over time of the economy. And there, if we go into historical data, we come to this today, that you find around a period of 7 to 10 years, that within 7 to 10 years you have these ups and downs of the economy. And then, of course, within a boom phase, it is not very surprising that with the economy performs quite well, that unemployment is dropping, while in a crisis we have high unemployment rates. And this cycle moves around a long-term trend. Well, and this you can more or less identify also with our aim that in developed countries we want the economy to grow around 1 to 3% in real GDP per year. And yeah, therefore, if this long-term trend has a very low performance, like we have it in Germany for the last 2, 3 years. And if we look what is going on today, that the Chancellor is meeting with the main guys from the huge enterprises in Berlin today, and think about Lower Saxony, our federal state here, what is right now going on with our largest company, VW. They just announced that they want to close down 3 factories in Germany, which is then where we have then the result that around 10 to 30,000 people will lose their job. And this, of course, also, and I think I have this slide still here. Here, if we think of the production approach, and here our manufacturing, within this part you have the automobile sector. So 25% of GDP, and the largest part is the automobile sector, and not only the cars which are manufactured, because think also total production. Do you remember what was the value for total production in Germany and what was the value for GDP roughly? And this I want from you, that after this lecture you have a feeling for some numbers. Do you remember GDP in Germany 2023 roughly? The internet, just type it in, or ask the artificial intelligence. Hopefully it will be right. Well, I recommend that you use it. So this is roughly 3 trillion euros. And what was the rule of thumb for a total production? Because this is the value for final consumption. And roughly total production, so all addition, if we add all intermediate goods, well, this was roughly 8 trillion euros. Well, and if you know these numbers, then you also can have a feeling what this news, maybe 10 to 13,000 people are laid off at VW, intermediate goods, another 10 to 30,000 people, maybe, due to the intermediate production. And then you know how this feeds through the economy. Okay, so back to this. And so if you have a bad performance, so the long-term trend has only a low increase, then of course this will be in line with high level structural unemployment. And this is maybe the worst type of unemployment. Because here in seasonal, well, it is not nice, but in the construction sector, you more or less know in March, in April, I will get a job because we are starting to build something. Also, frictional unemployment. Well, it is not nice to be unemployed 3 to 6 months, but if you think, well, if I really search for a job, then I will find some. Also, cyclical unemployment. Well, if we rely on history, then in general, we would think that after the crisis, the next upswing will come. So after 1, 2 years in the next upswing, it will be easier for me to find a job. But if this long-term trend is going down, then of course it is also harder that the economy will move into the next upswing. Well, and structural unemployment just means that your education is not demanded by the labor market. And this is, of course, due to sectoral change and, of course, maybe the most important part, technological change. And this I said the last time. I think artificial intelligence means many, many chances and means that many things we can do faster. And if we can things do faster, this means we have time to think about new ideas. And this was always the thing over time. And especially this was also during the Industrial Revolution 150, 200 years ago. There we really started to divide our work, and so we had just time to innovate. But of course, this also means that many jobs we do not need in the future, which we have today. So this will be, in my opinion, the most important thing which changes our labor market today. So hopefully you will take the chances which are due to digitalization and artificial intelligence. Yeah, and then we talked about the so-called hidden unemployment, which are not, so to speak, officially um, counted, but where you can say this is maybe potential workforce which you can quite fast use, and that this is relevant. Here we have the estimation from the IAB Institute for Labor Market of roughly 1 million. And the last thing I have talked about is that if we look at the data, that here Corona and financial crisis, we have, yeah, almost no or only a little rise in unemployment compared to the deep economic crisis which we had during these times. Well, and this is the reason for this is that we highly used the instrument of short time work. And yeah, maybe also you can say in developed countries, Germany is more or less the founder of this type short time work and to highly use it. And here you see within the financial crisis we had in the peak time in summer 2009, almost 1.5 million people being in short time work. And of course, during Corona times, it was much more, around 6 million. But in Corona times, it was a little bit different compared to the financial crisis. Financial crisis was, of course, an economic crisis, and Corona, during Corona time, when we have shut down our countries, then of course we more or less have forbidden to work, and therefore we stepped in with this short time measure, and therefore here I have it too. We almost do not see an, a rise in unemployment. But then, of course, if you add up here during financial crisis, short time work, we would have had roughly 5 million, and here then of course it would have been almost 10 million people out of work. Yeah, and now we come to the last aim of the magic square, the external balance. And there I already mentioned that in the first shot you maybe could think of, and we have talked about this when we looked at the expenditure approach, calculating GDP, that we can think of, well, the trade balance or current account should be balanced, so exports meets imports, maybe, but that we have this aim is, yeah, more or less due to that we are coming when we have talked or when the people thought in within the developed countries about such a system of aims, that after World War II we came internationally from a very different international framework, because we had a system of fixed, oops, again a typo, relation of fixed exchange rates with respect to the US dollar. And for this, then you can think, if you have a system of fixed exchange rates, then it would be a good choice to have more or less trade balanced or current account balanced, because if you are selling much more like we are doing it today than we are importing from abroad, then you have an inflow of capital. And of course, for the currency, you have also demand and supply. And this means if you have a large inflow of capital, that in general, your currency has to go up in the value. And then you have pressure on your currency. Or the other way around, if you have an outflow, then you have to devalue your currency. But if you have a fixed exchange rate, Then you have the problem that in the one case, the central bank have to sell the home currency, and the larger problem is if you have the outflow of capital and you should have to devalue your currency. In this case, then you have to buy the foreign currency, especially US dollar. Well, and this is quite expensive, of course. And then you have a problem. And during these times of fixed exchange rates, or think afterwards within Europe, we had also a very long time after 1973 when this system collapsed. Fixed exchange rates between German mark, franc, British pound. And during these times, in the 1980s, there, the financial markets, for example, they attacked the Bank of England. So the fixed exchange rate with respect to the German mark, and actually, UK is right now 1, 2, 3, 4, I think still the fifth largest, or maybe India has already overturned UK. So UK is, or during these times, it was the fifth largest economy in the world, and the financial market won the bet against the Bank of England. So they made a bet. You can defend your currency. You have to devalue. You cannot buy as much German marks as you need to still have your fixed exchange rate. And well, in the end, we had a devaluation of the British pound. So because of these problems within a fixed exchange rate system, then you could formulate that you have an external balance measured maybe at a trade balance or a current account, balanced current account. But if you don't have a fixed exchange rate system, and now we have free floating currencies, then of course the out and inflow of capital just means that you have a revaluation of your currency. And this, I think this I can directly show you, is if we, for example, see the fluctuation of the euro with respect to the US dollar, then you see we have here roughly plus minus 20% within a year of a fluctuation. So this is quite normal that currencies very rapidly revaluate, plus minus 20 years within a year. Well, nevertheless, sometimes you say that highly fluctuating currency is also a source of risk within your economy. So sometimes it is formulated that you can reformulate this aim of external balance, that you have low fluctuating currency, but again, look at this development. We have this plus minus 20% of US dollar with respect to the euro, and therefore we also cannot say that the ECB will that the ECB follows an aim of low fluctuation of the euro. And the last one, which you also sometimes find in textbooks, is a low susceptibility from foreign economies. And this you find something sometimes, and also if we look nowadays, and especially uh, over the Atlantic Ocean in the United States, then we in recent years see that we follow an policy which is called de-risking or decoupling, so that we are not that dependent anymore on foreign countries. But still, for Germany, we still see, and I said it to you, that we are roughly, compared to all other large countries, economically large countries in the world, the largest trader in the world. And therefore, for Germany, we have to admit that we have a high susceptibility from foreign economies or dependence. Well, for Germany, we have still a high dependence on the performance of foreign economies, especially United States and of course China. But in recent years, think of de-risking and decoupling strategies. And here especially look at the United States, and this, I think, is independent who will win the polls, the vote in the United States. Both the, uh, Republicans and the Democrats said more or less uh, America first. Think of the Inflation Reduction Act, that they said, well, the company only gets the public money if they are manufacturing in the United States. Here, Inflation Reduction Act. Yeah, then let's have a short look compared to the national account system where we calculated GDP. There we have more or less a similar system to count our dependencies with foreign economies, and this is called the balance of payment. So here we are summarizing all international transactions of a country, and within a year, and therefore then if we see this word balance, then maybe you will be looked twice at this definition when we see here balance and here a period within 1 year. Then I think in your business administration courses you define a balance in some other way. What is a balance in your company? When you think of here within a period, generally 1 year. Well, the report in your company then say within my company at 31st of December, I have 17 cars, I have 12 factories, I have 100 computers. So then you are reporting stocks. So then you're looking at one definite date and not at a period. Date and no period. And yeah, this you have to know. If you are talking about the balance of payment, then you have a flow measure and not a measure where you are measuring at something at some specific date. Well, of course, and the purpose for this is quite the same as our national account system in order to know what happens within our economy and for forecasting issues. Yeah, um, how if we go into more details, then of course we have more or less here the trade balance, so balance of goods and services. And then in order to come to the current account, then we have the primary income. Think also of the difference between gross national product and gross domestic product. And we have these primary incomes and of course also these secondary incomes when we have tax refunds or we have just one-way transfers. If something bad happens, like an earthquake in other countries, quite often we send then in within these disaster help to this, and this is then one movement of capital um, from one country to other country, and the other one is the capital account, and within there we find all the financial transactions like direct investments. This is if a foreign country wants to buy or at least want to buy a part of a home country, home factory, home enterprise. So direct investment means roughly a 10 larger than 10% buy of a home enterprise by a foreign enterprise. And maybe this you have heard in the news in the recent time that quite often Chinese people want to buy a medium-sized company in Germany or investing for 10%, 20%, a half in this company. And then, of course, this cannot directly be done. This will be checked by the German government, and sometimes it was forbidden for Chinese investors to take over German companies. Well, then we have the so-called portfolio investment. This is roughly the same or not the same as direct investment, but you are speaking of direct investments if you really want then to influence the home enterprise, and we are speaking of portfolio investment if you just buy a part and only keeping the stocks and you do not really want to influence the policy in this company. Then, of course, we have all the financial derivatives. About this, maybe you have talked in your investment and finance lectures. Oh, no, many typos here. Reserve investments and all other investments you can think of. But this will be then a topic of other lectures. Yeah, and in order to summarize, again, please keep in mind, although you will find in other textbooks that there is a specific aim, if you look especially at the numbers of Germany, we can say that we do not follow an aim of external balance. But if you think of possible aims, then you could think of balance of trade, balanced trade balance, or current account, low fluctuating currency, or a low dependence to the performance of foreign countries. Well, of course, where do we have it? These are not the only possible aims. And again, if we go to Germany, then also within our law, we find more economic goals. And of course, this will be one of the main topics next year when we have to vote, that many things are about a fair and balanced income distribution. And this is then our general tax and subsidy system, which we have in our country. And this especially we find even in the German constitution, that the government should do something for a fair balanced income distribution. And also since the 1980s, there we introduced in these times a new, and right now due to climate change it is one of the main also economic topics we have, that you should have a look on sustainable ecological conditions, and this you also find in the German constitution. Yeah, and I think this will be one of the main tasks also economically for you, for the young generations. We are just sitting here, not far away, maybe 2 kilometers, and then we have the North Sea, and the water will come. This is what is clear. There is some guy in the United States who says, well, all this will not happen. But anyway, natural science is natural science. This is different from social science, as I told you in the beginning of the lecture. And then also we have another one which we have introduced. This was in the 1980s in Germany, and sustainable public financial budget, and this is the so-called debt brake or German debt brake. And this we introduced in 2009, just in the aftermath of the financial crisis. And if you look at the media, at the news, then this is one of the main points where our government has a problem. Because one part of the government says, well, we have to rely on this debt break, so that you are not allowed more or less to increase public debt, and the other ones more or less say, well, we have so many tasks investing in infrastructure due to climate change, the change of mobility and so on. We really have to invest, and therefore we have to increase public debt. But we have this not only on the German level, we have this also within our European framework, and this we introduced with the introduction of the euro 1999, and these are the so-called Maastricht criteria. And this means that your increase of public debt is only allowed to be 3% of GDP. And also there is a second one, but if we look at the European data, almost no country really has followed this second measure, that we should have had a government debt ratio of only 60%. So on average in the Eurozone, we are now roughly around 80-85% relative to GDP. And here I give you these the development of our deficit in Germany and the government debt ratio. And here you see, well, we have introduced of Maastricht criteria. So you were only allowed to have a deficit not larger than 3%. And well, what do you think? Who was the main country which wanted to have that we have this rule? You are not allowed to increase your deficit more than 3% before the introduction of the euro. So when we had all the discussions within the 90s, should we introduce a common currency? Which country said we have to have strict rules that government debt will not increase that much? But yes. And who was the first one who has not finished it to this criteria? You see here, this was also more or less Germany. Within these years, France also didn't meet this aim, but before this in the 19th, France already said, well, we don't want this rule. So, and what happened then? Well, we had in the beginnings of the new millennium, then we had rules. What will happen? That you are punished as if your country doesn't meet this aim. And what did we do then? So we haven't met in 2000, 2001 the aim which we more or less introduced. And then there was said, well, in this case, Germany will be punished. You have, if you still go on to have higher deficits, and if you see this, we had higher deficits for the next 3 years, then you then was the punishment that you have to pay. Have we paid? No, because what have we done? Well, we just changed the rules. Because why? We are the most powerful country within the Eurozone. Germany, more or less, was the first country which has not met the aim of 3% deficit. Well, together with France. And then, since we did not want to be punished, we changed the rules. Together, of course, with France. Well, France already said we are not very happy with this rule. And then there was another country. What do you think? Who was the third country? Because we needed also some votes within the European system to change the rules. We could not do it alone. UK was never in the European currency unit, in the European monetary unit. And these strictly these rules were only in the European monetary union. Yep. No, because if you remember during these times, think of the construction sector. I think I mentioned it. During this time, Spain really performed very good, so to speak, because of the increase of their construction sector. Because afterwards, we saw that it was not that good, but until the financial crisis, Spain really had a really good economic performance. Well, this is quite funny because it was Greece. And then think of here we have the financial crisis and then the euro crisis. And during these times, we really pointed with our finger to Greece. What have you done with your public finance, with your public finances during the last 10 years? Well, if you are introducing some rules and then if you will be punished because of these rules you have more or less introduced, and the first thing you are doing is to get rid of these rules, then I think you cannot rely on that some other country will also keep these rules. And this is, of course, a very big problem which we still have, because then financial crisis, euro crisis, corona crisis, and all the stuff we have right now with the more or less very large global problems we have right now. Yeah, well, then about this I also talked about. We came very fast out of the financial crisis. And yeah, then within the next 10 years, the economy in Germany performed quite well. And you see during these times, and there, remember the circular flow, where I introduced also savings of the public sector, savings of the government, which you quite often do not find in other textbooks. But here we have a period of almost 10 years where we really saved money in absolute values in Germany. So positive savings in Germany. Well, and if you have positive savings and you have a positive development in prices, then of course this has to translate into a fall of the debt ratio. Because if you think debt over GDP, and if this is increasing and if this is decreasing, then this number also have to decrease. And there you see, well, we came quite close to the 60%. Then we had Corona, and still there we had an increase during this time. Debt also increased. So here we had debt increase and GDP increase. So this was here roughly 2021 to 2023. Why is the number then falling? Well, there you can think of this was the period of very high inflation rates. So of a very high price development, high inflation rates, and this means nominal GDP increased much faster than the debt level. And this sometimes is then called as a so-called a bad consolidation of your public of your government debt, because more or less this means, and there you think of what I told you. Why is it a good aim to have price level stability? Because then we are increasing our debt as a government, so we are directly get money from the private sector, but prices are growing much faster, and this means we get good money today and we repay the people with bad money tomorrow because of high inflation rates. And this is also what you have to keep in mind when you interpret such numbers. You cannot really say, well, a decrease of the government debt ratio is a good thing. Then you have to go into the numbers and see, well, what is the reason? Is this a reason or is this a reason? And also, if we look back in time, maybe it would have been better to take some money out of this savings here and already invest in infrastructure, in digitalization, and so on. But later on, we are always much cleverer. And to be a politician, I have to admit, is still a very hard job. Okay, so what we have then here is that, yeah, we more or less come from this magic square to now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 aims, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So then 7 aim system for the economy. Yeah, and what you maybe now hopefully can do, or now you have a larger background, is that if you go to the media, that you now for your own can interpret if you read something about the forecast of the economy. And as I said to you, right now for the last 15 years, I'm doing forecasts for Germany. This started for me when I was a staff in the German Council of Economic Advisors. So the 2009 inflation forecast, this was mine. Um, this was quite bad because I said 2% and we came out with 0.4% because of the financial crisis. Well, for my defense, I can say I think it was in November or in October 2008, then we were discussing, and this was just the beginning of the financial crisis. And within our meeting, then I was asked where will go the prices. And about this, we also talked. One of the main driver, if you have high volatility in energy prices, especially in the oil prices, that this can largely drive the overall consumer prices. Remember, we made this little calculation. If you have a drop or an increase of 20%, then just this effect will will have an impact of minus 2 percentage points on inflation. Well, and then I said, in my opinion, we had an oil price of 90, no, oh, sorry, oh yeah, of roughly 90 or 100 US dollar per barrel in October 2009. And then I said, well, in my opinion, we will have a drop in 2009 to 60 US dollar. Well, of course, we did not a very deep forecast for especially only oil prices. And then it was said to me that everybody is just taking for oil prices the so-called 1 year forward of oil prices. Do you know what a forward is? Future or forward? Have you already heard about these financial instruments? Yeah. Yeah, you are hedging with this, but what is a forward? With this instrument, you are hedging risks. And what kind of risk? It is possible you can take you can make a forward or a future on interest rates on almost everything. But what is it? A future or a forward contract? Well, this is just a contract that you write a contract with another person or another company. I can sell my good in the future for a fixed price. Or the other way around, I can buy this good for a fixed price. And for this, for oil, you have the so-called forward future market. So you can today write a contract for which price can I buy in 1 year 1 barrel, roughly 150 liters of oil. And there's a market, and then you have an equilibrium. And this market said there is a possibility that in the future, and this forward was still at 90 US dollars and not at 60, which was my opinion. Well, and then the guy said, okay, this is your opinion, quite good, but if everybody else in the world takes for oil prices the forward contract, so 90 US dollars, then we would have to explain why we are doing this different. And therefore, I was forced to also use for oil prices in the next year, in 2009, also 90 US dollar. And so I didn't have this drop, 30%. Then if I would have feed into my forecast a drop in oil prices from 90 to 60, then I think I would have had an outcome of inflation roughly between 0.5 or 1% and not 2%. Well, and do you know what was the average oil price in 2009 afterwards? Well, therefore, I tell you this story, it was 60. So I'm right. I was right. And one of my old lecturers, he told me, when you were right, just tell the stories. Okay, but actually, yeah, we are doing now with the Handelsblatt still every quarter a forecast for Germany, and this is our actual forecast. And yeah, there, for example, you see we think that will have a drop to roughly 2%, and I already explained it to you. This is more or less a base effect due to energy prices, because within the last year energy prices came down. Well, the price level is still very high, but compared to the last year, we have a drop, and therefore we will also have a drop of inflation rates this year and the next year. And here is GDP, and there you think we are more or less something like the black swan compared to other forecasters, because our forecast is that not only this year, but also the next year, we will have a drop in GDP. And here I have the forecasts of the main research institutes and also the government. What else? Yeah, this is the government. This is the so-called Gemeinschaftsdiagnose. There are, I think, 4 or 5 of the scientific institutes doing one forecast together. And well, here you really see that our view is quite different to almost everybody else. Well, and I have to admit, this is the first time that I hope that I'm not right. Because everybody else more or less forecast not a very large, but a little upswing next year. But if I especially have a look at our core industry, our automobile industry, and especially what happens the last weeks, I don't know if I have really to change, or that we really have to change our view. But anyway, next year we will see who is right or who was right in the forecast. Okay, and then I will take a new topic. About this I haven't talked last year, but I think especially for you as the younger generation, we will now step in for a long-term trend which we have and which you should keep in mind, and especially what this will mean economically for our country. And yeah, this is the demographic development of Germany. So this is population, and the blue one, this is pop. Well, and that we maybe have a decrease in population due to our demographic development, so that every year more people are dying. Then we have the number of birth in Germany. This is more or less clear, but we also have to think about, we already had the forecast that we will have a drop in population starting around 2020. And this didn't happen. Why did this didn't happen? The reason was, of course, not that we have so many babies in our country, but that we have now a large immigration. And this I also showed you when we were talking about GDP per capita. But so if we really have this large drop in the next 10, 20 years, this I don't know. But what we will more or less definitely will have is this orange line, and this is the so-called age ratio. And how is this defined? These are all people. I think here I took 20 to 65 over total. Sorry, not total. Over other way around. Oops, here we are. Older 65 over the number of the so-called workforce. Remember the definition of unemployed people. Here we are not starting at 15, but at 20. So roughly all people who can work. And here you see that this number is definitely increasing over time. And if you think about this on our social security system, then you know that until now, more or less, one working guy has to finance one retired guy. And this definitely will increase the payments for our social security system. And what we also see is the so-called total fertility rate. This is roughly an estimator for the birth rate, and you see that this is still lower than 2. Well, and why do I say lower than 2? Well, there is only one part of our population who will bring birth to the babies, and so we need roughly two per person, two babies per person to obtain a stable population. And there you see, due to this, we have two less children. And this for a long, long time. This is here starting at the reunification. And what else do we see? Age at birth. Here is age, sorry. This is the first, the second child, the third child, and the fourth child. And especially here, the age for the first child is not dramatically, but it is continuously increasing over the last 10 years from 29 now to almost 31 years. Well, and also, of course, this is again a problem for the workforce if our mothers become older and older and older while they have young children. And this is number of childs. And this is then, so to speak, the ex post view. The total fertility rate, this is defined as a woman within 1 year. So this is a hypothetical woman within 1 year going from 15 to 49. So this is more or less the period where you can get a child between 15 and 49. So we are looking at every woman in Germany within 1 year between 15 and 49 years, and then we are looking, has this woman had a birth within right now 22 or 23. And then, of course, think of a woman which will give birth to his first child very late. Let's say with 35 or 36 years, the first child. Then always until this woman is 35 years, it counts always 0 because this person has no child. But then ex post, if you look then at a person or at a woman which is 50 years old, then you definitely know how much children this woman has. Because afterwards, it's more or less not possible anymore to get a child. And here, Jahrgang, this is the date of birth. And here you see this 1931 means these are all women in Germany which were born in 1931. And on average, you see they had 2.2 children on average. And here you see also this continuous drop. And here I go to women up to 1977. And they are now 45. So maybe they get still some children, but not that much. So, and here you see that even this number is also very low. roughly 1.5, also much smaller than 2. And for this also, you see, we will have this dramatic change between retired people and working people. And therefore, I definitely think that we will increase the retirement age because there's so much economic pressure in order to finance the system that we more or less have to do this. And one last thing I want to talk about, oh no, these were 3 things, and now I have to talk a little bit too much. Well, let's take this diagram and the rest we will talk about next week. If you also think of this demographic development within our country, this means not only this ratio between retired and working people will increase, also think of the vote in the United States next week and our poll in the next year. This also means that the average age of the voters will increase. And we are still living in a democracy, and roughly within a democracy, what are polls about? In order to get 50% plus 1 vote in order to get into power. Well, and this means that what you are then doing, you are looking also on some aggregate or some average in your population, in your society. And then you can more or less divide the age of our population in people, 50% of all voters which are younger and 50% which are older. And if you make then a policy, so to speak, for 50% on average, then you will have a high chance to win the vote. Well, and the so-called median voter, do you know what the median of what the median of one sample is from statistics? This is some mean measure. So the median means 50% are older and 50% are younger than the median age of the population. Well, and what you see here is the development of this median age of the voters in Germany. And there you see we are roughly here. So median age is roughly 53, 52, 53 years. So if you want to win the polls in Germany, then again you have to ask me because I'm 52 years old. Well, but you are the young generation. You are supposed to live a little bit longer than I. And therefore, I really recommend go to the polls and say what you want. And if you think of the demographic development in our country, you have even relatively, or even young people have to go relatively more to the votes than the older people, because we are the old ones. We will be more in our country. And then, of course, politicians want to be in power. They are doing everything what the people who vote for them want. And for this reason, please go to the next polls and say what you want, where you want to have our country. Okay, this for today, and then we will meet next week on Tuesday, because we have the Day of Reformation. I don't know, is it called like this in English? So see you then on next Tuesday.